Welcome to Engineering Influence, a podcast from the American Council of Engineering Companies, coming to you from the 2023 Fall Conference in Austin, Texas, in our last day of full conference programming. And oddly enough, we're going to bookend our podcast the same way we did the spring convention. We had a conversation with Javier Baldor, who's the Chief Executive Officer of BST Global. And we talked about AI. And actually, Javier, we talked about this. We said, hey, let's check in the fall and see exactly where we were the last time. And that we're going to do it again. In the spring, you had a standing room only conversation with attendees on the promise and opportunities of AI. Now we're looking at implementation. How do firms actually harness the potential of this technology? Give us a snapshot of what your presentation to our firm executives was this time.
Well, great to be here again, Jeff. Thank you for having us. Super excited to be here in support of ACEC and with their wonderful fall conference. Really, I spoke similarly to how AI and big data are going to transform the AEC industry, and certainly there are a number of inspiring statistics in terms of what this will all mean that I'll get to perhaps in a bit. And then we talked about the how. What are the types of things and decisions that one should consider as they approach embracing these emerging technologies? And then I really concluded with some takeaways that hopefully we'll have a chance to summarize for your audience here as well.
You know, we've been talking to some industry leaders about this and the emergence of these technologies. It's really spurred us to get a technology committee established to take a look at these technologies, both the promise, the opportunities, a positive outlook. We see these as things that are transformative but will help the industry as long as we stay ahead of the curve. And then recently we did a podcast with power engineers about implementation and how they do it, and really the fact that you need policies and procedures in place to actually implement the technologies and get them in the right position to benefit the firm. From your position, what do you think firms need to do to start applying AI beyond ChatGPT only, but AI, machine learning, these things into their operations in the safest and most effective way possible?
Great question. I think, first of all, it needs to set the backdrop and some context. Quoting Amy Webb from Future Today Institute, AI is a system-level evolution disruption of the utmost magnitude. So when a firm goes out to set their tactics and their strategies and their vision, they need to contemplate the long game, and this is one of those system-level disruptions. So really, there are a few steps that I would recommend in terms of how do you start. It begins with the premise that the engineering business is no more. The engineering business is a data business. In my humble opinion, if you believe that, then you have to develop a data strategy, and the data strategy must be aligned with your business strategy naturally. And then the next obvious question becomes, who's going to lead this? And we did some recent research with regards to how many chief data officers are there in the E&R top 100. Any guess there, John?
In the E&R top 100, I'd say less than 20.
Good answer. It's 5.
Yeah.
It's 5. Such a strategic direction for our industry. To have only 5 at present. I'm sure there are more being contemplated. But you need the right leadership to establish that data strategy. From there, once that's established, you've got to go to the business model. What is that going to look like for our industry, which is hours-based? I believe it's a monolithic business model that will change when you start to see efficiency improvements on the order of magnitude of 40%, according to Goldman Sachs, for the AE industry. What is going to happen to that business model where that efficiency, is it going to be transferred to the client or is it going to be retained? If it's going to be retained, then you're going to need to commercially do business in a different way, perhaps lump sum or subscription billing or something like that. So it's going to be a huge change to the business model. From there, I would go into what are the legal risks that are contemplated. When you need to start, in my opinion, with the fact that people are using ChatGPT. Independent of company policies, it's being used. So who owns that work product?
Yeah.
Who owns that data? Because if the consulting engineering firm is giving away that data asset, it's revenue is walking out the door. But clearly need to understand the legal implications of that work product. And then lastly, how's it going to be delivered?
Yeah.
The skill of an engineer is going to be much broader in the very near future. It's not just an engineer, it's a software developer, it's a data analyst. So what kind of skills does the future worker need, and how are you going to keep score? How are you going to measure success and the like? So a lot to unpack there.
There's a lot to unpack, and I want to take a couple steps back, because when you talk about the limited number of chief data officers within the ENR Top 100, now some firms will say, well, I have a head of IT. I have a chief information officer. What's the difference? So explain how a chief data officer in that specific role differs from the traditional just IT, infrastructure framework and management. It's a specialized thing that is becoming much more embraced by industry. But in your words, how would you describe that unique role?
Yeah, I mean, not taking away anything from CIOs or CTOs. We're seeing some CTOs where a data officer sits underneath a CTO, but I'll speak to the skills of a chief data officer. These technologies are amazing, and understanding not only the algorithms, the machine learning models, how to structure data, how to handle unstructured data, to set up Azure data lakes, big data environments. One of the biggest challenges right now in that we talk to member firms and the industry at large is these silos of data. Think about it as your ERP data, your CRM data, your HCM data, BIM data, and the list goes on and on. Somebody, as a core responsibility, needs to own that. And I would argue that the foundation of any AI strategy is data. So you have to have a conscious big data strategy that begins with leadership in that particular area.
Yeah. So either a chief data officer or a data protection officer, someone who is in charge of managing the data, and not only managing the data, but understanding whether or not it is confidential, whether it's open source, how it's managed and handled for both, client safety, legal exposure, and the like. That's where it really differs from your CTO or your CIO, who's looking more at the security of the infrastructure. The data officer is looking at what's contained within that infrastructure and how is that managed and handled.
Security, big thing.
Yeah.
Security is a huge issue, and understanding, again, where does that data sit? Big challenge with ChatGPT obviously was in the public domain, and now with Azure OpenAI service and ChatGPT Enterprise, it's not by coincidence that that's happening, because the serious blowback and pushback, I might add, is that the concern is that they don't want their data in the public domain. That is clients and sensitive information. So we're in the very, very early innings of how ChatGPT interplays with large language models and data at large. So that big step forward in terms of bringing it into the four walls of an organization with those announcements.
Especially smaller firms need to be cognizant of that, because, of course, the push to use these applications is great. To your point, you shouldn't assume that your employees aren't using it. They're going to take advantage of the technologies that are out there. You need to stay ahead of it, and you have to understand whether or not your platforms are open source or not. And not every firm can create their own proprietary software, especially these large language library that have to go into a successful AI program. So it's understanding that legal exposure and having policies in place, I would imagine, that are kind of in line with, it's not just a department of an IT or technical department decision, it's a legal department decision. You have to have these policies that are robust, and you have to understand who's using the technology and in what way and who owns it at the end of the day. To your point about the future workforce, I've asked a couple of different firms, and they all have roughly the same answer, which is that as these technologies come on board, you're going to have, of course, the engineers who are required to sign on the line, and they have to be professional engineers and licensed. But the number of people to be hired to interpolate that data and make sure the data is being handled correctly to get the end result through these AI models. I mean, what should firms be doing right now to be thinking about future hiring for the non-engineer software developer software side of the world?
I think it's an awesome opportunity to recruit.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've heard for so many years that engineers are in decline. They're being lost to tech industry.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I might argue that this is tech with a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
This industry is shaping the world, going to save the world,
Yeah.
I believe. And what about melding tech
Mm-hmm.
with purpose?
Yeah.
And what a recruiting tool that would be. So I think positioning these emerging technologies, training to
Mm-hmm.
these emerging technologies, and leveraging them and building that talent within the worker of tomorrow is a way to bring and entice and say, you can not only work with these cool emerging data models and chat GPT
Mm-hmm.
and big data and all these things, and certainly in an engineering context, but you can change the world at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. What's been the reception so far when you present these ideas at a conference like ours? What do people come up and say after the fact to you? And, what is there one question that sticks out or is repeated a lot?
Well, I think it's just interesting
Yeah.
because the amount of energy, momentum, I guess is the word
Mm-hmm.
that comes to mind. We've been speaking to this for 2 to 3 years, and the light bulb has gone off.
Yeah.
I mentioned to you back
Yep.
in June. It's at a whole nother level right
Mm-hmm.
now. A lot of that is attributed to generative AI, ChatGPT,
Mm-hmm.
these, the advent of these types of technologies, and others that are coming along. But I think overall they're now understanding what the domain is. It's now shifting into what do I specifically do next? And what I always advise firms to do is not become intoxicated
Mm-hmm.
with these cool technologies,
Yeah.
but rather select a few core use cases that are discrete in scope and
Mm-hmm.
solve big problems. And start there and build some core competency and lean into those particular things versus trying to do these huge endeavors. But it all comes down to getting your data strategy foundationally right. I stressed it twice yesterday during my remarks. There is no AI without a foundational data strategy and arguably data that's clean. So
That has to be part of your corporate strategic planning. And to your point, I think that what we hear a lot from firms is that they're starting it in the marketing departments. They're starting it in the overhead areas where if you can cut the amount of time it takes to use to create an RFP response or in going after business development by employing ChatGPT, at least that's an internal overhead issue. Then you don't have to worry about client exposure. Is that kind of what you're seeing first as adoption and then spreading into the business?
Yeah, I think that's where ChatGPT started.
Yeah.
I think it's going to go into 3 core areas. Advanced data analysis,
Mm-hmm.
big opportunity
Yeah.
there. Certainly removing or eliminating, reducing repetitive processes, thinking in the project management arena. And then it's going to come right into design to
Yeah.
lower the cost of design. So it's there now. I think it made its entree and into writing blogs,
Yeah.
emails, those kind of things. But it's going to go into a much deeper construct within an engineering consultancy and the world at large.
And it's only going to get better. I mean, and that's the thing. It's one of those technologies that is good, and it's only going to get more precise. But at the end of the day, there's always going to need there to be a need for that human element, that engineer at the end of the day because as much as we like to think about technology displacing things, it's not going to displace us fully because you're dealing with things that result in human safety and just public safety, and you're always going to need that individual to be able to sign on the line and say, yeah, this design is correct. It might have helped you reach the conclusion of the design, but the individual still has to sign. So that's good. We'll still need engineers, but engineering firms might look more like data companies now in the future than they do now.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, the role of the engineer will never go away. I would never suggest that because there is failure is not an option. Lives are on the line in bridges and core infrastructure, so that will not go away. The role as it relates to the technology. So there'll be a strong QA/QC review process because these large language models are not perfect, nor near perfect. So there's a strong dimension of review, quality, that, in my opinion, will never go away. It's just a matter of degrees, right? That's the big debate is the work product 40% automated? Is it 50% automated? Some have argued well into the 80s and 90s, over a decade to 15, to 15 years. So one can argue, but at anywhere in that spectrum, it's massive in terms of the potential impact from an efficiency and productivity perspective.
So you're holding an event this spring.
That's true.
Talk about that and what people should know about that.
Well, with everything that's going on with AI, we wanted to host an AI summit. It will take place on April 16th through the 18th in Clearwater Beach, Florida. And our goal with it is to bring the preeminent design, engineering, and environmental consultancies from all over the world to talk about this very issue and what they're doing in very practical terms with generative AI, ChatGPT, big data, AI, machine learning, and how they're applying it in their everyday work product. How they're going to run their businesses, how they're going to manage deliverables for their clients and the like. So we're super excited. Been a tremendous response to the event, and it's the first of its kind. It will be the largest symposium for the built environment. So we're super excited about it. Personal invitation to you and ACEC to join us.
Well, especially with our technology committee. So it's something that we should definitely look at. I would imagine people can just go on the bstglobal.com and
bstglobal.com/AI Summit. We'll get you there.
Great. Well, Javier, I appreciate you coming on the program and kind of let's just make a thing about this.
Let's do it.
Every conference we have to have a talk about where things stand, and I think that we did have some of our freelancers in the room when you were presenting, so hopefully we'll have a little bit more content on that. But yeah, let's do it because we got to keep our finger on the pulse of this stuff. And I think that who knows what we're going to be talking about a couple of months from now, post-summit when we get into the spring. So you're holding your event in April. We're holding our spring event in May. Talk about that and take it from there.
Thank you for what you do, and thank you for what ACEC does. Fantastic conference here in beautiful Austin. So look forward to next May with you.
All right. Next May in D.C.
April
in Florida. May in D.C.
Done. Let's do it.
Wonderful. And once again, this has been Engineering Influence, a podcast from the American Council of Engineering Companies. We'll see you next time.